Good morning and welcome back to NASA's Johnson Space Center. We're having our mission status briefing for Flight Day 10 of the STS-134 space shuttle mission to the International Space Station. So we'll talk about the spacewalk that occurred overnight. And to do that, we have the lead International Space Station flight director for the mission, Derek Hausman, and the lead spacewalk officer, Allison Bollinger. So we'll turn it over for comments and then take questions. Derek.
Okay, thanks, Kylie. Good morning, everybody. Well, another great day in mission control and on the space station, the Space Shuttle Endeavour. It's good to have EVA3 behind us. The EVA went really, really well. After EVA1 and 2 and a number of relatively minor issues, but issues that represented challenges and slowed us down a little bit, it was really gratifying today to see the crew in the early part of the EVA get ahead and then finish strong and complete all the planned tasks for EVA3 in addition to one get-ahead task, which Allison will talk to you about. And this was a get-ahead task that was literally identified in the last 24 hours. So very proud of the ground team again, very proud of the crew, another demonstration just how well trained the crew has been and how well the ground team can go execute the plan. The other unique part about this EVA was that we used a new pre-breathe protocol to get the spacewalking crew ready to go outside. And if you recall from the previous briefings, it's called the in-suit light exercise protocol. The big difference being that it doesn't require an overnight camp out on the airlock. And I told you that we would evaluate how that protocol went after the end of the EVA and then make a decision on EVA4. Immediately following EVA, the spacewalking crew had a private tag up with the flight surgeon, and the flight surgeon reported that there was no medical issues whatsoever. No symptoms, no issues, no difference whatsoever from previous campouts or from exercise pre-breathe. So he gave the crew a clean bill of health, and the crew had nothing but positive feedback about the protocol. In addition, Allison and I and her team had a tag up to talk more about the nuts and bolts of the EVAs. During that tag up, we talked about the procedures that we used to execute the aisle protocol, and again, the crew was very positive. No surprises, no hiccups, no changes required, and they really love the simplicity of the protocol, the fact that it doesn't require as much time on the oxygen masks, it doesn't require the overnight camp out, so that very, very positive feedback. However, having said all that, we have made the decision on EVA4 not to use the OWL protocol. We're going to go with the standard camp-out protocol, and I want to take a little time to explain that to you so it's clear to everybody. One difference between camp-out and the IO protocol is the time that the crew has on their lithium hydroxide canisters, or the canisters in the suits that scrub CO2. So if you look at a camp-out protocol, when the crew goes out the door, vice the IO protocol, when the crew goes out the door, there is 40 minutes more time on the LiO canisters with the IO protocol as compared to camp-out. So big picture, when the crew goes out the door with IO, they have 40 minutes less capability on that carbon dioxide scrubbing canister. So that's one consideration. And with a typical LiO canister, we can, in a planned 6:30 EVA, we can accept that 40 minutes of additional usage on the LiO can when we go out the door. But you'll recall that on EVA4, Mike Fenk's going to be EV1, so he'll be the lead spacewalker, and Greg Shamatov's going to be EV2. On EVA1, Shamatov had an issue with his CO2 sensor. After that EVA, I talked about the rules that require us to deduct LiO capability when you have that CO2 sensor problem. So, regardless of how the lithium hydroxide canister is performing, when we have that CO2 sensor problem, we are required to assume less capacity. So when you look at the 40 minutes associated with the IL pre-breathe protocol and combine that with the possible impacts of the CO2 sensor, it would reduce the capacity of Greg's suit to the point that we might not be able to conduct the 6:30 EVA. So those are the pieces that went into the decision not to do IL and EVA4. And I just want to emphasize that medically, procedurally, and quality of life of the crew, IL was a complete success. And I would expect that it's going to be the EVA of choice on future EVAs. As a matter of fact, I know the the ULF-7, the 135 folks are planning that as their baseline for their single EVA. So from all perspectives, Isles was a complete success on EVA3. And with that, I'll hand over to Allison to talk about the details of the spectacular spacewalk today.
All right, thanks a lot, Derek. Like Derek mentioned, ISLE was a huge success this morning. I say this morning, but I guess it was actually last night. It seems like morning to me. My team actually got on console a little bit early last night to be able to watch the slow motion hokey pokey in action for real, and it was really fabulous to see that protocol that we put so much time and effort pre-flight actually come to a reality and be extremely successful. So with that said, as Derek mentioned, we had a very successful EVA3, EVA duration of 6 hours and 54 minutes. So Drew and Spanky worked their hearts out today and got all of our tasks completed, plus the get-ahead that Derek mentioned at the end of the EVA. So we started out the day with 2 crew members at the joint airlock, where we retrieved some tool bags and then headed out to the port side of the FGB, where we worked on setting up those bags and then removing some multi-layer insulation. The first kind of surprise of the day was when we were expecting to release 5 pieces of multi-layer insulation, and we actually discovered there were 7 pieces. But the crew handled this flawlessly. They were already planning on bundling those MLI pieces together on a wire tie and then temp stowing it on a Russian handrail. So they just continued with the process and just picked up the 2 additional pieces that we required. Once they were complete getting the work site prepped for the PDGF, the grapple fixture, they both headed back to the airlock and then retrieved the PDGF and its frame and its cabling, which is all one unit from the airlock, and then they worked together to inchworm that assembly back over to the port side of the FGB. We installed that. We got the 3 feet secured and soft docked, and then we hand tightened the faucet mechanism that I call it, that they use, the faucet handle mechanism to tighten down those feet. Use the cheater bar, the Russian cheater bar, to really lock those feet down, and we were good to go. Then they started working on installing the VSC, or video signal conditioner. That's a single bolt that we installed. Then they worked on routing the cables, 3 cables that came from the PDGF that were installed on the VSC, and then a 4th cable that had been pre-routed by a previous shuttle crew. We also installed that on the VSC without any incident. And then we installed a hard thermal cover that had some multi-layer insulation built into it. We installed that over top of the VSC and then ran a Russian fixed-length tether from the handle of that cover to the frame of the PDGF to help hold that cover into place. Once we were complete with the VSC install, we worked on kind of securing the PDGF worksite, and then we got started with installing the port Y jumpers, which provides the additional power redundancy to the Russian segment. The port Y jumper install went as we expected pre-flight. We had 2 connections to make on the node and then 1 connection to make on the FGB side. We had no issues with those. Once the crew was complete with those, the ground started their work to check out the new connections that we had just made, as well as put the inhibits in place for the starboard Y jumper install. Once complete with those Y jumpers, we took a tool bag and then headed back down to the lab to finish that lab external wireless communication, or EWC, task that we didn't get finished on EVA1. 2 crew members got in position and released the 3 Zeus fasteners on the micrometeor debris shield, peeled that shield open, released some multi-layer insulation underneath that, and it was at that point in time that they coordinated with the ground to inhibit the space station UHF radio. Once those inhibits were in place, we were able to still communicate with the crew using shuttle assets. So that was good that we were able to maintain constant communication with the crew during that entire task. While underneath that shield, they demated 2 existing cables, 2 existing connectors, and installed the new cable. Then they worked together to slowly close the shield. It was during the closure of that shield, as I mentioned, there are 3 Zeus fasteners that hold that shield in place, and historically we've had a few issues with these Zeus fasteners, so the crew knew that these fasteners could be tricky, and we had also discussed quite a bit pre-flight that only 2 of those 3 fasteners are ultimately required in order to ensure that the shield is structurally secure. So the crew members were able to get 2 of those 3 fasteners installed without any issue, and they spent a little bit of time troubleshooting the 3rd fastener and discovered that the retaining wire, they believed that the retaining wire that it engages on had kind of slid out of place. And we actually had a contingency tool with us to help us with that task, but we decided on the ground, based on our pre-flight agreement, that 2 of 3 Zeus fasteners was sufficient, and in order for us to remain on the timeline, that we would just tell the crew, thanks for the effort and the few extra minutes you spent on it, but we're just gonna call it good and press with the task. And so the crew was happy to hear that. So once we successfully completed that EWC cable install, we worked on stowing the old EWIS cable, stowed that back inside the tool bag, and then we made our way back to the FGB to start working on the starboard Y-jumper install. It was while the EWC task was going on that our Falcon, our power coordinator on the ground here, who was working with the Russians, informed us that we had made successful connections on the starboard side, and they also had the inhibits in place. Successful connections on the port side, and they had the inhibits in place for the starboard side, so the crew was able just seamlessly to start working on that starboard side. We had expected the starboard side would be a little bit trickier because, as if you were paying attention to the spacewalk, Spanky mentioned the rat's nest. He's like, there's a reason they don't call it something nice like a bird's nest, but they call it a rat's nest because there are truly quite a bit of cables in that area. So Spanky had to spend some time finding the best body position to be able to actuate the connectors that he was required to release. But it was good that we were ahead in the timeline, so he was able to spend as much time as he needed to get into place. And he actually ended up calling Drew over to assist him. But after persistence and much hard work, he was able to successfully demate the connector we needed, and he installed the cap just like we required. And then the rest of that cable install went on without incident. So I was very happy to see that get completed. Once we were complete with that task, the crew worked on taking some photos of the newly installed PDGF on the FGB as well as FGB thrusters, and I'm sure they took some other photos while they were working on that. They also cleaned up their tool bags and packed those and to bring them back to the airlock. It was at this point in time that Drew was ingressing the airlock to stow some of the bags that we were complete with and also transfer his digital still EVA camera for the infrared EVA camera that he was retrieving. It was at this point when he popped out of the airlock and he mentioned that he had got something in his eyes and they were watering quite a bit. And after speaking to him after the EVA, we believe this was the anti-fog. Prior to going out EVA, each time the crew members apply an anti-fog solution to the inside of their helmet in order to prevent fogging. And we've seen this happen a couple times in the past where if you're not careful about buffing the anti-fog just the right amount, that it can tend to flake off every once in a while and get in a crew member's eye. And this anti-fog is actually just off-the-shelf dishwashing soap. So if you've ever had soap in your eye, you know how that feels. So Drew reported that he had something in his eye and it was burning quite a bit, but it was tearing quite a bit as well. So he made an interesting comment that I'd never thought of before, that tears in space don't run down your face. They actually kind of conglomerate around your eyeball. So he was able to use the Valsalva device that we have in their helmets to help them clear their ears as we're depressing the airlock. He was able to rub his eye against that Valsalva device to get the tear free, and then he said he was able to press. So we gave him as much time as he needed in order to say that he was good to go. And then once he informed us that, hey, I'm feeling a lot better, we said, all right, let's head out to ELC3. So we translated out to ELC3 on the port side of the truss. Drew worked on getting in position with his body restraint tether and then proceeded to take the infrared imagery of the STPH3 Vader experiment, which was a late add to our flight. So we're very glad that we were able to accommodate the DoD payload and get those photos. Spanky then worked on installing MLI, multi-layer insulation cover on the grapple fixture on the gas tank on ELC3. Once they were complete with those tasks, as Derek mentioned, it actually happened while I was asleep overnight. We discovered that a piece of multi-layer insulation on the CTC, or the cargo transport carrier, which is another ORU that we have on the ELC, that a piece of that multi-layer insulation had come loose and they had thermal concerns and that we needed to reinstall that multi-layer insulation. So we were able to uplink the crew a few pictures overnight, and before we were even able to understand what he was doing, Drew said it was done, no big deal. So we were able to get that get-ahead done as well. And at that point in time, it had already been, a pretty long EVA, so we said, let's not even discuss any get-aheads, let's just work on getting back to the airlock. So then we ingressed, and like I said, it was a 6-hour and 54-minute EVA. Now we can answer some questions.
Okay, we'll start here. You have a question? Go ahead.
Rob Perlman with collectspace.com. With regards to the late add of the Vader imagery, was that an Air Force request that came late, or just an opportunity that presented itself late, or how did it get added so within the last 24 hours?
It was a DoD request that actually got added before we launched. So it wasn't the CTC MLI flap that she mentioned was the thing that we identified overnight just based on imagery that we'd gotten from station. We worked with the STPH3 folks, the DoD folks, probably a week before launch when they identified an issue. Basically issues with their ground processing had put their payload in a position that they didn't have the baseline data that they needed to gather information on orbit. So by using this infrared photography, as they changed the modes of the payload, we were able to get them the baseline data that they needed to have the payload be useful on orbit. So although it was late, it wasn't as late as the CTC MLI flap.
And And with regards to the 1553 cable, is that something you're going to try for on EVA4, or will it be now pushed to a stage EVA?
It's still on the table for EVA4. Our Orbit 3 planning team, as we speak, is talking about that.
Okay, next question.
Denise Chow with space.com. With the ISLE protocol, how long was that tested on the ground before you decided to try it this time around?
Oh, how long? You know, truthfully, I don't know how long it was tested. I know that Dr. Gernhardt, who's an astronaut who's been working on almost all the EVA pre-breathe protocols, has been working on this ISLE protocol for quite a few years now. So it's been tested for a while, and I know they did extensive testing at Duke University.
And then also just to follow up, so if there had been no issue with Chamatov's CO2 sensor in EVA1, it would be a decision to use it for the fourth and final spacewalk?
Absolutely.
Any other questions here? No? We'll go to the front bridge then. Marcia Dunn.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, first question for Allison. Thank you for all those spacewalk details. I couldn't catch the type of device that Drew Feustel used to rub his eye with. You said it's so fast there. Could you tell me what that is? And I have a follow-up.
Okay, so sorry about that. I do talk fast. It's a Valsalva device. So I think they call it a Valsalva maneuver when you try to clear your ears. And so it looks kind of, it's a foam block that they adhere to the inside of their visor. And then if they have issues clearing their ears, normally if you're in an airplane and you have issues, you just pinch your nose. This kind of serves the same purpose where you can just kind of wedge your nose down into the Valsalva device to clear your ears. So he was able to actually wiggle down low enough in his suit that he could rub his eye on that Valsalva device.
Oh, thank you. And a question for Derek, please. I'm just wondering what the status is, if to your knowledge, of the post-undocked pictures that the Soyuz took. There's some rumors on the internet about how that digital pictures may have been lost. I'm just looking for a status on what you know about it.
You know, I thought that question might come up, so I got a status before I came in here, and the imagery from the 25S photographs are on the Soyuz, still in the Soyuz, and they'll be transported to Moscow with all the other return cargo, and they'll be processed as part of that cargo. My understanding is that we'll have access to the imagery in about a week.
Thank you. So to your knowledge, it's safe inside the Soyuz still. No reason to believe that it got lost or damaged.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the line is Mark Carreau.
Yes, I had a question about the PDGF, and I wondered how you imagine it might be used with the space station.
Associated Press. Hello?
In terms of the FGB PDGF, Mark, one example is, there's scenarios in which we would relocate the PMM, and the folks analyzing that operation think that FGB PDGF might be an ideal base for the SSRMS to do the PMM relocate. It also gives us access we don't have now to areas on the aft end of the segment, on aft end of the station on the Russian segment. So it gives us some flexibility and some additional reach with the space station robotic arm.
Thanks very much. And is this the only PDGF on the Russian segment, or is there another?
This will be the only PDGF on the Russian segment.
Thank you.
Next is Charles Atkinson.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you discuss the communication issue which Pilot Johnson spoke of post-EVA related to the Quest airlock?
I'll have to check and see exactly what issue he discussed. I may have been doing handover or off console, so I am not aware of any communication issue that occurred today. I know our communication with the astronauts throughout the day was good. There's times when just due to satellite coverage, we switch back and forth between the space station loops and the shuttle communication loops. But I'm certainly not aware of any failure that occurred today that affected our ability to conduct the spacewalk.
This was a comm issue that Johnson spoke of between, I believe, Endeavour and the Quest airlock. It was a bit of chatter on it post-EVA between Harbaugh and Johnson. And it seemed like that they were unsure how to resolve it or what would fix the issue.
Okay, I can certainly find out.
Thanks so much.
Next is Todd Halverson.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today. Derek, I heard you mention that there was an EVA, a single EVA planned on STS-135, and I'd been under the mistaken impression that there were no EVAs on that mission. Could you tell me when that one got added and what the content is, if you know? Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not the right guy to ask that question. I honestly, I'm not familiar with the timeline.
Just to follow real quickly, though, there is a EVA on 135, so the fourth EVA on 134 will not be the last in the shuttle program. Thanks.
And the EVAs planned for STS-135 will be conducted by the increment crew members on board. They won't be conducted by the space shuttle astronauts.
Okay, so the fourth EVA on STS-134 will in fact be the last ones conducted by space shuttle astronauts. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thanks very much. That's all I have.
Okay, Bill Harwood.
Thanks. I got two. One quick follow to Mark Carreau's question for Derek. Is there a specific job that the PDGF on the Zarya is being put there for, or is it just simply in case it's needed down the road?
It's both. The one specific thing that they're looking at using that PDGF for is a future PMM relocation. Beyond that, it's just flexibility and access, especially when you consider the fact that on EVA4 we'll leave the boom on station. So the boom combined with the SSRMS and that FGB PDGF gives you reach, up and down the station.
Thanks. And one for either one of you. I'm not sure what. I was thinking about this earlier today that President Reagan announced the space station program back in 1984, 27 years ago, and you guys have now done 158 EVAs to put this thing together, and it's done basically. One more shuttle EVA. Do either one of you have any way of giving us just a sense of the capability you guys have spacewalk-wise now that you didn't have when this project started? I realize you could write a book about that, but is there anything you could say in general terms about how far you guys have come over those last 3 decades of the decision to build the station and then going and actually doing it? Thanks.
I can start and you can go?
No, that's all you.
Yeah, I mean, this is well before Allison's time, but I started in 1990 as a thermal operations and resources flight controller, a Thor flight controller on the station side. And of course, that was well before we had flown any hardware. And as I'm sure you're probably aware, Bill, the assembly plans for the station changed dramatically from that 1990 to 96 timeframe when folks realized that the original plans just were not supportable in terms of the amount of spacewalks and the amount of EVA hours that would be required. So there was a significant redesign done to make the modules and the truss segments more modular, kind of plug and play without a lot of assembly required by the space station or by the spacewalking astronauts. But even then, I can remember, in the mid 90s or mid to late 90s when we started looking at the details of the assembly sequence, and once the design had been solidified and finalized, that there was a lot of concern about the amount of spacewalks that were going to have to be conducted. And I remember there was a term called the wall of EVAs, and it was just this unbelievable step up in terms of the amount of tasks that we do and the number of EVAs that we do. And again, as I'm sure you're aware, in the early shuttle program, a flight with 1 or 2 EVAs was considered a pretty challenging mission and something that was going to be difficult to go do. Now with these station missions we fly today, with 3 and 4 EVAs, the norm, and then when you factor in all the robotics that we do in the background, including ground control robotics overnight between EVAs, I mean the difference in the upgrade and the capability is just difficult to quantify, but just tremendous. The things we do today, if you went back mid 90s, early 90s and talked about doing it, there's just no comparison, really. It is amazing what these guys can train the crew to go do, and it's amazing what the crews can pull off these days.
That sounds like the end of the questions on the phone bridge. Are there any follow-ups here? No, we'll go ahead and wrap up the briefing with a few programming notes. We do have the videos from the solid rocket boosters to begin playing that on NASA television today. So that will start at 11 a.m. Central Time. And then the Flight Day 10 video highlights will start at noon. We have a video file of the Expedition 28 crew getting ready for their launch to the station with a departure to Kazakhstan. That's at 1 p.m. Central Time. Including some more replays of the SRB videos. We have the ISS flight director update at 4:45 p.m. The shuttle crew and station crews are scheduled to wake together at 6:56 p.m. And they'll be doing the late inspection overnight. And we also have the joint crew news conference overnight. It's at 4:42 a.m. Central Time. And just a reminder for reporters that the phone bridge will not be activated during that. So you need to be at a NASA participating center for that. And with that, we'll go back to Mission Control Houston. Thank you.